What's up? Yo. So today I'm gonna be talking about the three primary handgun cartridges. This is like a world debate that everyone tries to tear each other apart with, and so today I'm gonna squash it. I'm gonna squash it today. So there's three primary handgun cartridges. There's 9mm Parabellum, also known as 9mm Luger, and then there's 40 Smith and Wesson. Smarty 40 40 Smith and Wesson is basically a short 10mm auto. 10mm auto is not a cartridge we're talking about because it's not the main three. It's the most powerful. That's actually my caliber. I'm a 10mm guy. I mean, 10 auto. I mean, I like the 40 too, but I'm the 10mm auto guy. That's me. That's my cartridge. And then there's 45 Smith and Wesson. So there's 9, 40, and 45. 9mm, 10mm Smith and Wesson, and then 11mm Colt Action. And so, yeah, that's it. Or Action Colt Pistol, sorry. So it's 45, aka 11mm Action Colt Pistol. I know no one says that, but that's just me putting it in millimeter dimensions. 45 is 11mm, and then A.C.P, its stamp is Action Colt Pistol. So here we go. Let's do this. Let's do this thing. So this is not an argument. This is an answer, a remedy to the conclusion or resolution to the caliber cartridge debate. And so what it is 9mm is the most efficient. Yeah? Yes. Everyone can agree with that. Every single person. Because also that is what it was made for. It was the Germans, the U.S. United States Americans, etc. But Germans initially, they created or produced that cartridge, the 9mm, for efficiency. They just wanted to tap, like tap, blap, 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 done. Like an effective, efficient cartridge. But it wasn't an effective, it was an efficient cartridge that was effective enough through efficiency. It's an efficient cartridge. You could kill people efficiently. You could, have efficient amount of ammo. You could, you know what I mean? It's efficient. It's an efficient caliber cartridge. Then there's the 40 Smith and Wesson. The 40 Smith and Wesson was produced to be effective. That's it. Effective, like effectiveness. That is what they were going for. Like, so, they had 45 A.C.P, but they didn't want that punch. They didn't want that recoil. They didn't want that strenuous, heavy gun like cartridge. Like, they wanted something that was like effective, like all around. And so 40 Smith and Wesson was created for effectiveness, not per se efficiency, not per se power, but effectiveness. It was like the two worlds of power and efficiency squeezed into one cartridge. and it was 40 Smith and Wesson. A lot of people talk about it, but they have never shot it because usually they cannot afford to buy another gun, or they just like to believe the bias. And so, they're biased thinkers, ignorant. They choose to ignore based off of people's words. They're followers is kind of what I'm trying to say. So they have never shot it, ever. They have never shot it. And if they have shot it before, typically it's one of those like weak-wristed people. So I'm a 10 millimeter guy, 10 auto. And so I shoot a more powerful cartridge. It's just everyone talks mess about the 40. Even people that pack 45s talk mess about the 40. Not all the time though. That's a more rare situation because people that pack 45s like how 40s are still powerful enough to be effective. And that is what the 40 why the 40 was produced, because it took play in everything that the 9 was failing in during the 1986 Miami shootout. And so the 9 millimeter failed, even those like even those mag charged 9 millimeters failed. And it was just like, we need girth, baby. We need some mass in this, because that resistance shreds. That's why. And if you don't have that resistance, it just won't shred. And that's why you need to be able to break bones. I mean, I'm sure a 9 millimeter would still break bones, but the angles, and if you're going in at an angle, that 9 is just gonna bounce off of the bones. It can't be like that. You need enough mass to just still at least chip the bones and things like that. Not that the 9 cannot do that, but we're talking about a caliber with more mass in circumference, in diameter. So we're talking about an inch bigger in diameter. So that's a lot more if you think about it. It is. It's in circumference, a whole inch. That is a lot. In effectiveness, that is a lot. It is. It's a whole millimeter more that you are capable of cutting that nerve. You get what I'm saying? Sure, it's not cutting, but it's you get what I mean. Let's say it mushrooms, and the mushroom, when it pulls out, it acts like a saw blade, and it just cuts tendons and all that stuff. You know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. Muscle. Yeah. So 40 is just a more effective cartridge. And so then you got, the fracture. All that follow-up fracture. It's hot. It's hot enough for it to fracture. And we're talking about the 40, like some hot 40. That 40 fractures, and it's kind of like a minor explosion. We could get into 400 Korban, but at the end of the day, I covered 40 more and defend 40 more because it's the one that people talk mess about the most. And so that's why I speak about 40 the way I do, because I've shot 40, I've shot 9s, I've shot 45s, I've shot 10 millimeter, I've shot 400 Korban even. I've shot a fair amount of handgun cartridges to say 40 is all around, I believe, it is the most effective cartridge. And that's what it was meant to be. It was meant to do that. It was meant to be the most effective cartridge all around. Then there's 45. 45 is the powerhouse. That is, if you want to hit somebody and kill them like within the first shot, That is what I call the Grim Reaper cartridge. Like 9 millimeter to me is a 9 millimeter to me is you want to touch base. That is that cartridge that you could say it's the perfect cartridge. It's the cartridge. It's the caliber cartridge that you could always rely on. It's that Red Bull red eye, the red bullseye cartridge. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you just can't miss with it. The only way you're gonna miss with a 9 is, man, you gotta be like weak and like in unmaintained firearm, and your sights gotta be out of line, like everything. You know what I mean? Unless you a natural shooter, different story. But yeah, so 9 millimeter is that's what 9 millimeter is. It's like that, you know, just straight up being able to just tag dudes. You know what I mean? Like, that's 9 millimeter. 45 though is like the Grim Reaper cartridge of all three. Of all three. That is the critical hit cartridge. Like, it's always a critical hit, and you're always gonna kill. Like, sometimes that critical hit might barely, like, fail, but these dudes are still gonna be down. They're not gonna be moving around with a hot steaming 45. You get what I mean? And then there's 45 super. There's even, let's say, in the 9 millimeter world, there's 357 SIG. 357 SIG is a hot 9. So compared to a 357 SIG is like, dang, ouch, like, typically 40 would lose on everything but the mass factor, the fact that it's got mass. So the 357 SIG, it would basically outdo a 40 Smith and Wesson, besides on the mass factor. Mass is so important that so many people, it's so underrated though. People don't take this into consideration when choosing a cartridge, I guess. Or they do, but it's more like when talking about its effectiveness, when really looking at a cartridge in like how it is, and like how it performs, they tend to undermine mass, like saying things like, I don't want such a heavy cartridge. But at the end of the day, it's mass is the only thing that affects. It's, if you're relying on pressure to do the killing for you, to do the cutting up and all that, pressure is only gonna bruise the body. That's all. So 9 millimeter, although the advancements of technology would make it open up more, it's still about mass. Imagine that same technology being applied to a 40 or a 45. It's gonna open up even more than the 9 still, as it already naturally does, or natively does. And so the thing that 9 lacks is mass. But this is for certain. This is certainty. So this is not something we're arguing about. This is not something to debate about. It's 9 just lacks mass. 40 has an intermediate amount of mass. And then there's 45, which has the most mass. If you can make a 45 open up and mushroom out at the same speed as a 9 and a 40, kind of the average between both of those speeds, that is why I call the 45 a Grim Reaper cartridge. The Grim Reaper cartridge. That is the 45. I wish I owned a 45, but I'm so concerned about my safety that I stick to a 40. And that's why I'm a 10 millimeter guy. Because I'm like, I just, there's so much more than just people. There's bears, and etc. And so I'm like, 45 does it works against bears and all that. I mean, I don't call it the Grim Reaper cartridge for no reason. Like, it's 45 is that like hitter quitter cartridge. I know there's gonna be all these people talking mess. My 22 is a hitter quitter. But that is not the point. That is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when that 22 opens up, it's going to be the diameter of my 45 natively, naturally, without my 45 mushrooming out. My 45 mushrooming out is going to be 2 to 3 times bigger. It's going to mushroom out in a bigger circumference or diameter than the 22 mushrooming out. So you can't give me that. That debate, it can't happen. It's not something to argue about. It is a given. It is natively that. That is what it is. And so that's why we choose the 45. Because when it comes to power, when it comes to taking someone down, that is the critical hit in the gun game. And we're talking about the 3 primary handgun cartridges. If you want to hit somebody and make sure that if you hit them the first shot, you're going to take them out, that is the 45. You cannot say so much that about the 9mm or the 40. You could probably talk a little bit more on that about the 40, but the 9mm, it's not so. It's not. And that's why they actually replaced the 9mm with the 40. So these days, the FBI goes back to the 9mm because it was recognizing that it kept failing, like individuals who were weak-wristed or of a smaller stature. It was just they could not carry the 40. They couldn't. And so not only that, it was the budget, the money, how much does it cost? And so buying a 9mm Glock or something, you know what I mean? Versus a 40. It's just the amount of money. It was also a money thing. Then it was also the fact that with a 9mm, let's say technology has advanced. With a 9mm, you can be effective as old classic 40 Smith & Wesson ammunition. These days it's different. If you apply those advances to a 40 Smith & Wesson, it's not likely that 9mm could compare to the 40. Or it could compare, but it's not going to be as effective as the 40 still. And so that's what's going on. That's what it is. That is what's going on. That is the current thing between the 9 and the 40. The 45 that's like the sheriff's cartridge. Because it's just, I don't know if you know about the 45, but I just want to talk on the 45. Aside from the 9, because I don't want to neglect the 9. The 9mm, I'm going to start out by talking about the 9, and then we'll work my way into the 45. Just to kind of, respect the lady, you know what I mean? So the 9mm was used for efficiency. The war was cutting short, resources were going down. What do you need? You need an efficient cartridge that is effective enough, efficiently, to take dudes down within the first few shots. And so we have more capacity, we have more efficient effectiveness, and it's effective enough in an efficient manner that you could get the job done within 2 to 3 shots. And that's all we need. So this was happening in war. Like this was happening in during Luger times. And that's what was being used, in Germany to just perform efficiently. So kind of this in retrospect, to the wars with the 45 would be like the cartridges that they were using, the 9mm Luger or those mag 9mm cartridges were like, these things are not working. Because these Vietnamese or whoever it was, no offense to the Vietnamese, I actually respect Asian people a lot. This is just, I'm talking about a war that happened. So I believe it was the Vietnamese or the North Korean war, but I strongly believe it was Vietnam. So I'm just gonna leave it at that story. It was, these guys were basically going kamikaze. Like they were, yeah, it was the Vietnam War. They were pumping themselves with steroids and adrenaline. They're hitting themselves with adrenaline, and they were just, they were just very, very strong Vietnamese people. And when they were getting shot with those 9s and what, 380s and whatnot, they were not going down. They were not going down. And so, or 328s. Anyways, they just weren't going down. The Vietnamese soldiers were not going down. They were taking the hits because they were so pumped up on adrenaline, and steroids and whatnot. And so, I mean, during these times, war was like that. Even the United States was doing that. The U.S. soldiers were also pumping up with adrenaline and steroids and other drugs. It was just a fortification for the war so they could win it. They didn't care what was gonna happen to their neurological system after that. They didn't care that their attributes were gonna basically mutate. You know what I mean? They didn't care about that stuff. They were just trying to win the war, and also they didn't really know too much about what was gonna happen after. The scientists were not that smart back then. Scientists were saying that it would be impossible to land a kickflip. Now there's dudes doing 3 flips. You know what I mean? So that's kind of what scientists were like back then. They still had this complacency, of the imaginary world kind of, interfering with their scientific studies, God. So God was still in the way of reality. And so, sorry, I don't know what the heck that was. I think that was a spider, man. Maria! I'm kidding. But, so, the 45, they're like, we need a new cartridge that's more effective, and just take these dudes down, like, bam, at first hit. And sure enough, they produced the 45, and they blah, 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 blah. And it worked. We're talking about one hit. These Vietnamese would just fall like that. After one hit, they would just get high off their own smoke. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, they were getting hit. Like, and it was working. Like, more kinetic energy, like more power being delivered. That is a blue angel, I think. Yeah, those jets be, woo! Those jets be. Okay, so more kinetic energy, more power. We're talking about the Grim Reaper scythe. Or, yeah, the Grim Reaper scythe. And just, you get hit by that thing, it's heavy. It's a heavy. And you're just gonna get, man, it's game over. It's gonna go through and out the back. You know what I mean? It's gonna break bones and everything on the way through. Like, it was just heavy and hurtful. So when it opened up as like mushrooms out, the 45, that's why I call it the Grim Reaper cartridge, because it reaches far, reaches very far. You think you got away, but you didn't. Like that hook, just you just got, yeah, it's like pierced blunt force trauma. And so there's that. The 40, it just became that most effective cartridge. Effective. Not the most powerful, not the most efficient. 40 was the most effective. That's it. It lacked efficiency and it lacks power. So that means when it needs more power, it fails. When it needs more efficiency, it fails. Compared to the 9 and compared to the 45. And that's why the 40 is not necessarily the most well-rounded. It is the most effective. You could call that the most well-rounded, but that's a give or take. That's a double-edged blade for you. Double-sided sword. Two-handed. You get what I mean. Two-bladed. Yeah, whatever. Sorry. So that's what it is, man. Like, that is the debate. That is the argument. That is all of it wrapped up into a pretty little present for you. And so there's your sign. I mean, there's not much else you can talk about. There isn't. Like, when we look at it in reality, like when we look at it at the actual, like, it's like it is what it is. It's like the actual matter. The matter of fact is that each cartridge has its strengths. So you have to choose, who are you? What are you going to be doing with it? That is it. Honestly, people have been saying this forever, but they have not been saying the resolution, the results. They have not been saying the conclusion of it, because they didn't know. Everyone was still trying to figure it out. Man, I didn't make this video anytime sooner, but I could have actually made this video like 3 years ago, but I didn't because, I mean, I did, but then I deleted it. But I didn't because I was just like, people aren't really ready, I guess. But I need to warm up on my handgun cartridge skills again, because I'm about to start security work again, but this time I'm going to be armed. I'm going to be armed and I'm going to be trained with 40 Smith & Wesson. And so, yeah, because I'm a 10 millimeter guy. That's my diameter. I like the circumference. I like that kind of well-rounded cartridge, like the all-around cartridge, a little bit of both worlds, power and efficiency. And that's why I like the 40 Smith & Wesson. Sure, it's not the most efficient. Sure, it's not the, most powerful, but I just like 10 millimeter and just the diameter of it. And so that's why 10 millimeter auto is my main cartridge. That's the cartridge that I would carry around everywhere. But for security detail, to not get in trouble with the law for packing 10 millimeter auto, because 10 millimeter auto is considered overkill, which is that's highly overrated, I guess. But you'd carry the 40 Smith & Wesson because it's not overkill. But it's still effective enough to do the job, with a pack a punch. And that's why I carry the 40, as well. Because, it whips a little bit, but to me it's not a concern because I'm strong, I'm a strong dude. I'm strong enough to carry that anyway. I mean, so yeah, it's what you're gonna do with it, and so that's what I'm gonna do with it. So it's who you are, what's your stature, what you look like, how strong are you, and that normally decides what cartridge you're gonna choose. But just because you're not strong enough to pack a 40 or a 45, or you don't care about efficiency like a 40 or a 9, it doesn't mean you have to talk mess about the other cartridges. Let's say if you're coming from the middle, just because you choose to be the most effective cartridge Just because you prefer like balance between both worlds doesn't mean you gotta disrespect the 9 for not having enough power or the 45 for not being as efficient. So there's your sign to all the 40 carriers. You think I didn't have something against you? Trust me, I do. Like I carry 10, and I've been studying like ammunition for a very long time, and so I know the back draws of a 40. I know the back draws of a 10. I know what the problem is with that cartridge, and that's why I say that. Don't be disrespecting the 9 and the 45 because they basically made you, buddy. Like, if it wasn't for them, you're the offspring of the 9 and the 45. That's what you are, man. Have some respect for your parents, baby. You know what I mean? Have some respect. But okay. Who the father and mother was of the 9 and 45? Honestly, I don't really want to get into that conversation, but because I don't want to talk about yeah, but it could go vice versa. What if the mom was the 45, rather than the father, and what if the father was actually the 9, then the mother, you know what I mean? So it's like, yeah. But that's it. That's it. It's who are you? If you're a big boy, if you could like, endure, a punch, like 45 is just a good cartridge shoot. But there's some big boys that they got really weak wrists. They're really fragile dudes. So, or people. Sometimes it's a girl, a big girl. So, you gotta think about who you are, your condition. And so that's how you'll choose your cartridge. Your eyes will tell you. Your eyes. You'll know what you're comfortable with. The one you just imagine in your mind. The one that you look at it and it's perfect. Not too big, not too small. Not too big, not too small could be compared to 5mm. A 22. So it could be like 22 and then 9mm and then 40. 40 might be too much. So 9mm might be your middle ground. You're not too big, not too small. It's it does well for me. Like, of my stature, who I am as a person, how I work in my mind. Because sometimes it's a mental thing too. Sometimes it's a mental game. Some people are really timid, very timid people. There's other people, man, you could tell them something extremely life-threatening could happen and they wouldn't even budge. Like, their nerves, like, man, they're so dumbed down. They're so dumbed down they couldn't understand what you're trying to tell them. They couldn't feel what you're feeling regardless of who you are as a person. They're so damaged. Their nerves are so destroyed. Their ability to sense is so just let's just say inactive, that they couldn't tell you, they cannot vibe with people. So it's like sometimes it's a mental thing, and so sometimes if you're that kind of person, you ain't concerned about nobody's feelings because it's like you're not timid at all. Like you're a blunt hammer. You know what I mean? You're a blunt hammer and you ain't worried about nothing. You just gon', you know what I mean? You ain't worried about how it feels. You just gon' blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? And so there's some people that are very timid though. And so you got to think about who you are mentally as well. It's a mind thing. It's a psychological thing. When you shoot it, the sound of it, it's like the condition of your ears, the condition of your eyes. Sometimes it's like when you shoot it, it spits fire. Like some people can't handle that type of thing, like mentally. Like what if they have a traumatic experience from like their house having been burned down because they lit a match or something? You know what I mean? Like some people have that kind of trauma and they can't have that around them. Or loud noises, extremely loud noises. Like some people just can't have that. Like like, or heavy, like super heavy stuff. Just the weight of something. Who knows? Psychologically, that probably reminds them of something. It triggers a past trauma. And so, like, who are you? Who are you? And that is how you are going to choose your cartridge. It's a personal thing. But okay, everybody. Y'all be safe. Y'all be careful. Don't forget to take your P100 mask when you go to the range. And don't forget to take them ear protections with you. And also them bulletproof goggles. And if you want to go above and beyond, just go all decked out in bulletproof, bulletproof freaking armor and gear, pants, leggings, whatever, shirts, like gloves, like, you know, just ballistic proof gear, basically. And just, yeah, have a good one. Be safe. Enjoy your time out there. And just don't hurt nobody. That's it. And don't hurt yourself neither. I don't like hearing that people are killing each other or killing themselves, especially with firearms. And just go out there and just protect the world, care about everybody, and just, you know. And if you're a bad person, if you are a corrupt individual, you know, it takes time, it takes practice. You know, repetition is important. You know, you don't learn to be a correct person in just one day. So if you're a bad person and you're watching this video, or a corrupt person, and you're actually the person that goes out killing people, and you're watching my video because, you know, you just try to gain some, you know, like intelligence about which G-Dub cartridge you want to pick. I hope everything that I communicated came across well, and that just you know, it takes time for you to be a correct person, to liberate yourself from corruption. It takes time. You know, you got to work on it. You know, you got to get money, because money helps you get resources. Unless you could find some way to get free resources like food and water and etc., and just become healthy. You know, like reduce the toxicity. Yeah, and you'll liberate yourself from that corruption. So, but okay, correct and corrupt people out there. How about I just say this? People out there, bye-bye.